Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The Dean Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The Dean Talks starts now. That is such inspiring music. Welcome to the Genius edition of the Dean Talks. You have accepted the challenge of exploring music, math, and patterns with us, your relationship to them, and their relationship to each other. Just a note, the views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of hosts or sponsors or Ripe Fruit Foundation. This information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice. This session is being recorded. As I stated, you are in for a treat today. We have an artist. We have a feature presentation, and it's all going to be culminated with an appearance by Dana Hawkins himself, which will really be a nice treat at the end of this Dean Talk. So we have Rubeling that will present with us, and then we have a feature presentation by Kellyann. But I'm going to start by, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my camera on so you can actually see me. And there we go. All right. So hi, I'm Stephen King. Thank you for the compliments about my cowboy hat. I wear it everywhere. I want to talk about something interesting because I was traumatized by music. So I'm going to let that resonate for a second. I know you've never heard that before. Who in the world is traumatized by music? How is that even possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. When I was younger, and I'm still young, as you can see. When I was younger, 19, 20 years old, I was actually started my radio career, and I was the program director of a radio station. And I'll tell you how that happened. I was riding the city bus, right? And then the general manager of the radio station got on the city bus and he said, I need a program director for my radio station. And I was like, hey, I'll be the program director. And that's not what happened. That's me being joking. Anyway, what happened with me trauma-wise with music is at a young age, instead of being able to enjoy music for all of the beauty that it has, I was literally, I had to listen to music in order to make money for the radio station. So I was only able to, due to the volume of songs that were coming into the station, I had to literally only listen to 30 seconds of the song, which meant if that artist did not grab my attention within 30 seconds, it was off to the next cut. So that in a nutshell is what kind of traumatized me to music. And what it ultimately meant is that I was desensitized to music, even now. So I wanted to share that with you because this is about neurodiverse situations, and that definitely qualifies. So once again, I still don't view music the same way, but now I have gotten better. And now I can enjoy music more than I did when it was just all about business. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Dana talk about music and math and patterns. And what we're looking for out of this Dean session is genius. My name is Stephen King. I am your host. I am going to go back off camera and continue doing what it is that I do, which is presenting the Dean Talks. So we're in for really a great treat. And I want to start by this artist expose with Rubeling, as she explores similar themes in her latest work.
My drawing practice has been with me for a very, very, very long time. But I really, I don't really start with drawing necessarily. I really start in reading and in text. I am working on 60-inch square pieces of paper. They're mixed media, right? And the larger format, I feel like it's performative, so that my body actions are, the drawing is the record of that. Okay. Now, of course, that is how that's when I look at all art. I often always think about, or I become aware, not every time, but when I become aware that I'm standing at the distance that the artist stood in the making of the thing, it's very empowering. When I'm thinking about, so of course it's called triangle, but really the triangle, in terms of a text, it's the 47th proposition in book 1 of Euclid's geometry book. So the math that I practice, which is one of the things that I know that you're seeing in the work, comes from ratios and proportions. It's very much embedded, or the diagrams are embedded in the architectural diagrammatic drawing. And what's interesting to me about architectural diagrammatic drawing is it is a set of directions, right? It is an abstract set of directions. A line art, or these abstract, simple shapes to scale on a piece of paper eventually turns into a building, right? Imagine how that happens, and how many people, skill sets are involved, and how many people have to imagine what this drawing is directing them to do. But you can certainly, an architect isn't in the ear of every single construction worker or surveyor or plumber, electrician, you know what I mean? It's fascinating. And then the other portion of it is early modernist, constructivist aesthetics, and the elemental, the reduction down of ideas and form. And in this case, in Russia, right, it would have been for the illiterate serfs who had just been liberated from the Tsar. And Axmaner realized, wow, these patterns I'm observing, I can turn them into models, and therefore they become, I can't make a model of the full universe, but I can make an emulary, right, a model of what I understand the patterns of the planets and the stars and the Earth to be. And then all of a sudden we have this, I can share it, right? So it's easier to share the pattern I'm seeing, right, in this model. And it's really quite beautiful. And it's considered to be the origins of the first architectural thinking. And Wittgenstein would tell you that it's a toolbox, right? The elements and principles of language, right, are sounds and abstract shape or symbolic shapes that get arranged as sounds and as sounds joined together. And then those sounds get translated into some, alphabet, which are just completely abstract symbols. And that through practice, we pick up on the pattern of how to use it, how to use the toolbox of language. Fundamentally, what is American Sign Language? Think about, what is fundamentally the toolbox of American Sign Language, and then where it intersects the language abstractions, and ultimately it is a received sense of elemental actions, okay, using the body in this case, right, and how it's expressed that communicates a state of point of view, and that it requires at least two people to understand the pattern. So interesting. And because in essence, in terms of our modeling, right, so instead of, a sphere of the planets, right, now this phone models our consciousness. It's a wonderful tool, but it is not my identity, and it is not human contact. Definitely the opportunities to practice communication in addition to oral and written communication in a tablet has barely been touched.
All right. Very informative. And once again, you are listening to the Dean Talks, and this is a Ripe Fruit Foundation presentation. For those of you that are in the chat, feel free to participate in the chat, leave any questions or comments that you have in the chat, and we will certainly address those as we move along. A reminder to the panel and guests, leave yourself muted if you are not speaking or presenting. Make sure that you are muted if you are not speaking or presenting. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you've been with us before, this format is going to be a little bit different. We have a feature presentation by Kellyann. Kellyann has over 20 years of experience as a civil environmental engineer and program manager. Her ability to explain, defend, negotiate, and coordinate program policies and activities with a variety of stakeholders has resulted in the successful organizational balance of mission and environmental sustainability. Let's welcome Kelly.
Hello, community. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about math, music, and patterns. What I'd like to do today is share with you insight on how I move through the community as an educator, as a leader, as a manager, and as a person. I believe that it's important for us to talk about the connection between our whole person and the things we do. And so what I like to do is really talk to the practitioner today and really give you an opportunity to start to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to our natural mind. And so I will be walking you through first just a brief discussion about this beautiful tool we have, our brain, and then we'll be talking about how tools like math and music create patterns that lead to a healthy brain. So please bear with me and join in with me as we have this discussion. I see neurodiversity as the study of how our brains work in connection with our sensibilities and our nature and our built environments. I have dedicated my career to showing up as a person who displays overcoming obstacles. I'm an engineer, I'm a sustainability developer, and what that means is that I create an opportunity to balance economic development, community engagement, and any E that I see fit, engineering, environmental, education, etc. So that's who I am. And I thank you for joining in on this journey with me. Our beautiful mind. This is where we experience time, fear, connection, memories, and our genius. Our brain uses inferences, emotions, recollections, imaginations, and they all are experiences of our shared brains. We know medically or physically, nearly 10,000 neurons serve the mechanical connection that is developed, that develops our ability to know things, understand the world. We use this beautiful mind, this instrument, to recognize why chocolate cake is hard to resist, why we laugh and joke, why our legs move when we ride our bikes. So our mind is our central organ. Next slide, please. Oh, you got to. We know that in connection with our central nervous system, we have our senses that allow us to operate, right? Through hearing, through our ears, our senses is one of the most important senses when it comes to alerting ourselves on things that we experience. For example, an approaching car, right? Telling you, where it's coming from and how long it's going to come into, at what point it's going to come into your sight. Hearing is also central to our social interactions. It allows you and me to communicate with others by processing and interpreting complex messages in the form in many forms, in the form of speech and sound. Just like the visual system, your hearing system picks up on several qualities of signals and frequencies and detects sounds, pitches, loudness, durations, and locations. These are things that we do naturally, but it's good to stop and think as practitioners how our senses are operating. Next slide. Okay. So as we think about our senses and our abilities to connect what we experience to our mind, let's talk a little bit about math. Math is food for the brain, right? It helps us develop the brain muscle. It increases our intelligence. It allows us to see connections. It prepares students to be employable in the future. It increases our awareness of the world. Oftentimes we'll hear people say, oh, I don't like math. But math is the fundamental of how we exist. Math is about finding patterns and connections. Math is a science that studies the relationship between abstract entities, numbers, geometric figures, and symbols. Through mathematics, we know that quantity, structure, and space and change happens. We know that as it happens, we know that it happens in the form of patterns. Patterns are repeated numbers or shapes or experiences related to events or objects. Math allows us to see the connection between the development of the pathways. Math is about having fun. One of the main reasons the brain circulates is because of math. It forces developmental health and fitness. And we do that through, as practitioners, we study that through processing, collaborating, developing solving problems, communicating, connecting. We do that through behavior modification. We do that through identifying and monitoring performance. This is what we do every day. And as practitioners, we want to begin to identify how this can change. What tools, for example, math, can we use to move forward and heal our brains and heal our experiences? Another tool is music. We use music to impact every part of our lives. What I'd like to do now, if I could have my engineer play the YouTube connection there, I want you to take some time and listen to Al Jarreau.
Our ancestors had a mystical connection with red pandas, and what was a blessing became.
As we're enlightened from the visuals, I want you to think about the movement you thought about in your mouth and the senses that you had, the feeling that you had to smile, and think about the words of the songs that opened up your heart when he talked about the woman and the relationships. And I want you to think about the feeling in your gut that made you think about the good times, the good memories. I want you to think about the point at which you begin to start to tap your feet and understand that the music is really creating a movement in every part of your body, your mind, your spirit, and your existence. And so what we as practitioners need to do is really grab a hold of that tool of frequency and music and begin to use that to heal our brain, heal the way we live, heal the way we feel, and know that through music and math, we can control and heal our brains. I want to take some time and walk you through a case study. If someone could tell me how I am doing with time, that would be great.
You are excellent with time. Please continue with your case study.
Perfect. So I want to introduce you to an individual, a harpist, an artist, Jeff Majors. He believes that every time he steps on the stage, he creates a sacred place. He creates a place of healing. And what he has done is create a tool, next slide, please, that will allow institutions to work with different members of the community. Jeff Majors is the CEO of Network of Doves, which is a nonprofit organization. And he has a contract with the court system. And through that court system, he works with individuals who are going through different justice system phases. He has created a program that represents expressive therapy, which is an innovative approach to managing one's behavior. What he does, he understands that the information that our senses impact our mind, body, and spirit. And he uses various audio and visual modalities to support that recovery process, that resiliency through behavior modification. The curriculum that he has designed explores participants to adjust patterns and obsessive belief systems that they have. So he'll introduce a video that will serve as the lesson points for the participants. Expressive therapy, what it does, it impacts, it helps us to address the impacts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once again, it introduces the concepts of behavior modifications to the participants and assists them with drawing out the creative connection they have between music, visual experiences, and their own self-expression. The participants' root connection to music and videos allows the facilitator to meet them where they are in terms of their sensory experience. Also, in terms of neurodiversity, the expressive therapy consultant that he trains meets the participants in a place where it can create balance and transcend their current experiences. So it gives them an opportunity to step out their normal day-to-day activities and experiences and belief systems, and gives them an opportunity to explore mentally, how can they move forward in a different way? So through music and video, these are allowing participants to explore alternative self-expression modalities. The rehabilitation process with expressive therapy is a complement to what we typically know as talk therapy. So it is a complement to the traditional mental health services. And what we are doing in this expressive therapy program is introducing a complement to what we experience in mental health sessions. So I would encourage practitioners to continue to explore the balance between music and mental health therapies. As I close out, I want to give some tools as it relates to diversity and inclusion and how we think about our genius. When we talk about genius, I believe that it is my belief system that everyone has a level of genius that simply needs to be developed. And what we are offering today is to use music and math to develop that level of genius, to use these tools to create diverse and inclusive environments, to enhance the understanding of how each individual can come together and create a different type of universe, a different type of experience, whether it's in your classroom, your workplace, your home, your community at large. Our goal as diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners is to ensure conformance and compliance. And our goal, and the plan is to start to create a number of tools that will make that easy in terms of implementation. So to build and elevate our minds is what we need to do as educators, managers, innovators, leaders, artists, musicians, parents. And we know that it's a collaborative effort that creates the positive energy for all of us to heal and make it where we can have control of how we move forward. One thing I would like to suggest as we are moving forward and defining our differences, to begin to define them in different ways. Yes, there are needs to define what we experiences in the medical sense, but as practitioners, maybe we can begin to look at individuals who have differences in a different way. For example, if we're working with individuals who have dyslexia, we could start to define those individuals as analyzers. They have the ability to appreciate the big picture. And we want to not only to identify them as having those skills, but to begin to have the individuals define themselves as having those gifts and skills and level of geniuses. If someone who is different in the way that they're autistic, we could begin to define them as the innovator, the individual that focuses intensely on tasks and is great with developing structure. The motivator. Maybe there's someone who has a strong sense of empathy and they have a good awareness of how others feel, move, produce. We could begin to look at them as the person who shows up to the table or the classroom or the workspace as a motivator. And maybe it's the executor that focuses, that it has the ability to experience the hyper focus of his or her interests. Maybe they are the people who are most resilient in moving forward with strategies and adapting to change. And those are executors. So as we think about our genius and our sensibility and our diversities, let's begin to identify different descriptive ways of bringing teams together. Neurodiversity is a term used to describe nature in various ways, describe our human brain in various ways. Neurodiversity is the function of how differently one or more ways we move. It's the characteristics of the way we think, learn, process, and behave. Next slide. So what I'm asking you to do as practitioners is let's work as a community to find enhanced ways to observe, identify, empower, and leverage. And through these types of efforts as a unit, we can begin to heal some of those diverse issues that we are dealing with, you know, in terms of how we define one another and how we do things. Next slide. I want to encourage all of you to express your I am within your universe. Whether it's a built environment or a natural environment, we have the ability to create the environment that we want to experience. And I believe that through math and science and music, we can do that. So I would love to engage the community right now. Miss Ebony, if you want to facilitate some questions, let's get down to hearing the voice of our audience.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for that. So insightful. I have a whole page full of notes. So first, I want to know who resonates with the different hats that Kellyann just laid out for us. Executor and the analyzer, and you know, maybe there's some overlap, maybe there's more than one. So feel free to chime in. Now you can come off of mute and share or call out if there was one or more than one that resonated with you, or put it in the chat.
Okay, well, it resonated with me, and I hope everyone notices my wardrobe change.
Yes, we
And
do.
speaking of hats, I try to keep my hat going no matter what it is that I'm wearing. I'm sporting my dashiki right now. I did want to say that was it was super important what was said, because the bottom line is genius is not defined solely by a score on a test. Genius can be defined in many ways. Some can be linear, you know, if we talk math. Some can be more abstract when we talk about music, for example. So, you know what we do need for the engineer is we're going to need for our next session is to have a little clap thing so that we can play the claps like they do. So, you know, clap thing. So we'll add that. And I wanted to once again just reiterate how well that scope was defined by Kellyann. So if you have questions, put those in the chat, and we'll certainly address those as we move on. But now we are going to turn the show over to an iconic artist, which is Dana Hawkins. Dana, thank you so much for joining us, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Hey, Dana, this is just going to be a special treat for everyone.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I appreciate it. I wanted to say to Kellyann, that opening video like knocked me over, because I'm a huge Al Jarreau fan. Like, you wouldn't know that, right? But huge. And some of the guys that recorded with him like have become like friends of mine. And when I was in college, a few of those same guys on those albums were like my teachers. I remember I was on tour with Esperanza Spalding, and Al Jarreau was the opening act for, we were the opening act for Al Jarreau. So like just seeing him in person was crazy, because I had already had like L is for Lovers and the title album, just Al Jarreau with Morning, and I have Breaking Away, you know, that's one of my favorite ones where he's got the video of, you know, it was on Sesame Street. They actually aired that video like on, that was, yeah, he's the real thing. So that totally just man, it just erupted. Like I was over here screaming, like I'm surprised the phone wasn't shaking, because I mean, just he's amazing. But thank you for that. And I really did resonate with what you were saying. It's too much for me to unpack right now, but yeah, you were knocking down all kind of, real serious subjects that, I like the frequency of the way they're being covered now. I think people are in general getting to be more nutritious, or at least like pursuing a direction that is healthier for them. So some of the, innovative or like things that you're pioneering are, very, very inspiring.
I like that you said the word healthy, because that's what it is about, developing the health of our brain and our experiences. So thank you for that feedback.
My pleasure. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm much less tech savvy, especially when it comes to phones, because my phone is usually overloaded with like audio and like things that I have to learn for music. So most of everything I'm going to give is just like organic personal offering. Eventually I'm going to play some. This is my instrument. This is a Keith Roscoe 5-string. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. So just some background on me. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I was born in a very nice Jewish hospital, Sinai Hospital. A lot of me and my friends were born there. It's a great hospital on Northern Parkway. And so I was born there. I started elementary school as basically where I started learning music formally. I'm a full-time musician, educator, and producer. And I guess I'll unravel some of that in the coming moments. But to get back to the beginning, so sorry about that. Basically, I started out playing music really heavily in like elementary school and church. Both of my parents were like fervent Christians, preachers, everything. And so I had a natural inclination to the drums, just the vibration, just the kinetic energy that was involved with it. It just was very stimulating. It was like just one of those things I couldn't keep my eyes off it. I couldn't figure out how to like not see drums as the center of everything that was happening in church. So that's the beginning. And then I started in elementary school, like learning how to read, so then dealing in the mathematical part of music, how I didn't know later on how supernatural the application of math would be in my experiences as a jazz musician. So fast forward to college, and I get accepted to Berklee College of Music. So then I start there with a film scoring degree. Well, that was at least what I was pursuing at the time. And then it changed to professional music. And through that, I basically was opened up to like everything music, including the mathematical part, starting to learn that chords and scales, just the way they're used and executed, can evoke emotion. I would find people writing, songwriters who they weren't even connected to the emotion that was in the song. Like some of them were like dealing with a breakup. It's like their first year away from their high school first love. So they're sort of in despair, and then they're in this new position where, they're making all the decisions for themselves. They're not really with their parents anymore. They're who they say they are as far as anyone else is concerned. This everybody's first time meeting everybody. And to watch people be so good at the science of music that they could create emotions that they don't have, like talking about being in love with someone and being like super happy and understanding the kind of chords you need to use to create the vibration for that, even though them at the moment naturally aren't able to produce that emotion exactly. So a lot of great producers that we know, and this is getting back to how the science and every element of it comes together when it comes to the math part. Because you have great producers and we see them, they're like, man, why is that guy living like that? Why is he not, he writes the most beautiful music, but he kind of lives a tough life, or he lives rough. He's not so nutritious to himself. in reality, this is a person that has become married to the very scientific part of the music, where they're able to create things vibrationally based on patterns, based on, I'm going to use these chords. This particular chord feels like hope. They can then marry the emotional content that they feel is relative to the vibration of this chord, in progression with other chords that have their own emotion, which eventually tells a story. Now, getting to the phrasing part of things is how we speak. You have spoken language like I'm speaking now, but it's really comprised of a ton of rhythms. So I can say everything I'm saying rhythmically without it being words. It's like da 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 da. That was literally, I can say things rhythmically, you know, without it being words. I took the phrase that carried the words. So that's what phrasing is. Phrasing is when you take all these really small ingredients and you create a conglomerate of these ingredients. And when you put them together, and you start from the beginning and you go through the whole vibrational field to the end, that is a phrase. That's when you actually have all these little pieces that come together to make up a word, you know. And since we deal in music as a language, phrases are the building blocks. You know, phrasing is why the words they do, you know. So it can become a very kind of, it can become a very scientific situation without there actually having any scope on how emotionally to be connected to anything. So I found myself in college really being faced with something different than what drew me to music, which was just an intrinsic interest in the sounds. Like when you see Al Jarreau and the fact that he's capable of so many sounds and so many, like he's a percussionist, he's a horn player, he's a violinist, he's like an orator, he's like a court jester, he's a lawyer, he's the dude outside trying to sell you some, you know, basketball tickets, you know what I'm saying? It's like he's just all those people on the mic and he's just like, you know, then he's an eagle, you know, it's like you just hear all these sounds, you know, so, you know, and sometimes I wonder, even looking at him as an older gentleman, when I saw him, you know, when we opened for him, he was so old, he was so much different than, you know, he was back when he was doing the record like Glow, like that was like 70s, you know, but to see him be able to produce those things that those records are made of. And I'm like, I know you're not living like that anymore. You know, like there's no way you could be living the same tempo and that same response to life and rhythm as you were when you were writing these songs in the 70s, because that's like a super young, healthy guy. He looked like an Olympian on the video that Miss Kellyann, you know, posted. So it's like, man, you can't be, how are you able to produce and invoke the same emotion within the music that makes the storyline what it literally is? Like, how are you able to go back? You don't have as much strength. You can't get from one side of the stage to the other side. One of his ears, he was completely deaf. And I mean, it's just like to even think about that, like, wow, you actually don't even hear in one of your ears, and you're still able to somehow project this authentic stamp of your emotional content, like where you're never going to be different than you always were. You're just less capable in certain departments. So it's really something to, when you bring up the patterns and, you know, how people respond to music, or you were talking inclusion, you know, people that have different, clearly to me, just responses to life. You know, people are using different ingredients because learning's not linear. You know, everybody learns as they need. You know, some people are just starting to pay taxes. You know, some people say, hey, you were supposed to know that a long time ago. But based on their lifestyle, the demand for them to know it is like now, you know. So that's pretty much an umbrella explanation of how I arrived at, you know, the moment I am now. And right now, my career is like, it's really, I don't want to say insane. I mean, I feel like the pandemic only fortified some things that I needed to work on, or just some doors I needed to open. But, you know, recently I've been playing like bass and drums almost the same amount in both, you know, and it's like interesting, like the dynamic when you're in a studio or when you're in a working situation. When I'm a drummer, it's like most people are like, yeah, man, we'll call you when we need a beat, you know, thanks, man. You know, did you check out the music? Cool. You know, so they're just like, yeah, just come and do that thing to the music. When I'm playing bass, it seems like there's more concern about the musical input. You know, there's more just like, well, what kind of patterns would you know, what kind of bass line, what kind of pattern are you going to create as a counter pattern to what's already been written, you know? And so, you know, thank you for that. That was sweet to say. You know, so figuring out counterpoint. Now, I hadn't really gotten into like classical music when I was in school, but I did go to school with conductors and people that were arrangers, and they did, you know, they wanted me to come and play their arrangements for their recitals. So like, hey man, I wrote this really crazy arrangement. I want you to play drums on it. I want it to be crazy. I wrote all this stuff. And, you know, so I'm playing my friends' arrangements and I'm realizing like the counterpoint, like the counter rhythms, and here's this kind of phrase and here's this other kind of phrase. Like you have polyrhythms, you have 2 and 3, like you can go 1 against 2. So you say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the idea behind counterpoint. 2 different identities, phrase-wise and rhythmically, working together to create just one singular idea. So once you feel that groove, you're not just feeling da 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 da. You're feeling da da both at the same time are so that actually feels like West Africa. That feels like Brazil. That feels like where a lot of our relatives are. When you hear that rhythm and syntax language, you start to see how rhythmically, mathematically, you know, all of this stuff really comes into play. Even just culturally, like there's certain rhythms that I could play around like my West African friends, and they're like, hey bro, that's like Mali, man, you know, you're doing this very specific thing, and this is ceremonial thing, but I don't know how you know this, you know. And then you have like some of the Cuban percussionists, and they're like, they're telling you it's African, but they've created some whole other innovation to it where it's for the way they dance. That's actually the way it's designed. So they contort and change the shape of the language to be specific to their, again, response to life. So you'll see different cultures using the same claves or basically dealing in the same cadences to produce whatever result that they want. And that goes back to it being scientific. This is all patterns, it's all math. But when you keep grinding and putting those patterns together, eventually they work together to create a conglomerate of an idea. Like even a note, if you hear one note from my instrument, right? Okay, this is a harmonic. It's like a false note, okay? It's not a actual note, okay? It's based on the physics of the vibration between where the strings are connected and where they're harnessed, okay? So even one note, your ear can't detect it, but but to make one note, you need millions of you need basically millions of harmonics to like a chromosome, and they basically wrap around each other. And by the time you hear the note, or by the time your ear is able to perceive the vibration, it's just a note. But it took several harmonics to make it up. It's like a thread. You know, when you look at a piece of lanyard or a thread, you think it's just a string, but when you look closely, it's like very many strings that are just wrapped together really tightly. Okay, so that's when you're getting a note and you hear any kind of note, understand that that's like a myriad of harmonics that are wrapped together. And by the time that note has revealed itself to the listener, that's what that vibration sounds like. That's how your brain perceives it. Okay, so when we're talking about language, math, you know, we're talking about any version of art. It's very, I think there's so many roads and so many ways and so many paths to what can achieve the result, that like, I don't know that there's an end to it. You know, I've only ever just seen more and more. Hold on, I think there's a question too. How do I get to the questions? I don't know how to like sustain the questions. I'd love to answer the one about the string.
Yeah, let me jump in. There was one question about who are you? And you talked a little bit about that at the beginning, but what's coming out in this chat is that you are really teaching now. I mean, you have kind of left the wheelhouse of abstract artists, and you are in the wheelhouse of I am lecturing about music. So let's just clarify. We do have a transcript of you going as well, but let's clarify once again. Dana is a world-class artist. He has traveled with some of the most iconic groups. Dana, go ahead and list some of those groups that you have traveled the world with your music.
I played with Michelle Indigio cello, Esperanza Spalding, Myron Walden, Jeremy Pelt, Estelle Soiree, Gym Class Heroes, Wyclef, Jerry Wonder, Ravi Coltrane.
Yeah, you're mixing, I mean, you are literally mixing iconic names with those that might not be as iconic here, but around the world, they are iconic, all of them. So I wanted to address that very quickly in the chat. And what I like, and you're doing good on time, so we're fine. What I really like is how, again, you have been able to pull the topic of this series together, the patterns, the music, and the math together in such a profound way. So I just wanted to address that question. And you said there was a question about strings, because I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I think there was something. I think I saw something that it looked like it was like a question on, like, how were the strings composed or something.
All right, yeah, I got it. So is each string in a guitar really composed of several tiny strings? Dana?
Okay. Yes. Yes. But the thing is that it's different for different guitars. Like, you have guitars that have many, many strings. You have some guitars that only have 4 strings. You have some guitars that have like 6. I think the standard is 6. The standard guitar you'll see has 6 strings. Now, as far as how the strings are made per se, maybe, yeah, they're using some kind of like pressure wound strings that they use a lot of different small pieces of metal to make one. I don't necessarily know if guitar in general is just made of many strings per se, but I know that the average guitar I see is made of, 6 strings. The only other one I've seen as much is 7, and I have 5 strings. I have 5 for Matt. Yeah. And that's basically only for range. It's not so much to have the number of strings, but bass at some point became lower. People just wrote songs where the bass was lower than the standard tuning of a 4-string bass could go. So because music got lower, people started innovating and creating an instrument that could suit that. So adding the 5th string, you have way more range, or just like more range in the lower register.
Okay. Yeah, let's clarify. The question, I think, was, is a string composed of many strings?
Is a single string composed of many strings?
A single string composed of multiple strings, all to make that string, as if like a fiber or something that has multiple lines that make up that single fiber. Yeah, right. So I think that's
Okay, yeah, I think no. I mean, as far as I know, it's pretty simple. Like, there's one bass string, there's one string, and then there's like another string coiled around it. So it could be maybe one or two or three. I don't really know like the exact, like how they design bass strings. It could be many that are just like braided together, you know, and then they wrap one string around it, around the outside of that. But I've never like taken apart a bass string though. So I should get into that. Like maybe I should just take one of my old strings and just take it apart. Cause I think they may be onto something. There may be like many threads to that string. But yeah, as far as I know, it's just pretty simple. It feels like it's one or two maybe strings in the middle. And then there's one thinner string that's wrapped around the outside of those strings. But I have to do some surgery and dissect the string.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that question for us. And the chat is active around this very intriguing topic. So just in as we wrap up, Dana, could you share? And here's why I want to do this. For those that are here that want to get exposure to Dana, Dana, where can people find you and just sit back and listen and enjoy your, you playing either solo or with other artists? What's the best way for them to get the full Dana Hawkins experience?
I think the best way for them to get that is like my Instagram page, because it pretty much leads to everywhere, like the YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel just under my own name, Dana J. Hawkins. But again, Instagram is pretty much the one that lets you know exactly what I'm doing in the moment, whatever's going on at that moment. So, that's pretty much how to reach me. Facebook, but Instagram is pretty much the main one. I have two pages, Prince Anand and Dana J. Hawkins is my main page. And between those two, everything that I'm doing is posted constantly.
Yeah, we are, unfortunately, we're a little limited with time here, but I am ready to just listen to Dana and Kellyann unpack. It was just such a good, great synergy between them, and Lori's video to start it off at the beginning. This has just been really a great session. So Kellyann, if you could also share your contact information, that would be great. Did y'all hear me? Okay. So
Yes.
Kellyann, oh, there you
I'll
go.
put in my Instagram is KFew.
Okay. Your Instagram is, if you could drop that in the chat, or engineering could drop that in the chat, that would be awesome. We have to make room for our very own Ebony Kinney. Ebony, welcome to this episode.
This is such a full episode. I mean, I have really enjoyed this so much. I think the common thread that went throughout this for me, and please chime in if the same was true for you, is this definition of equity as valuing that part of ourselves. If it's music inclined, or it's math inclined, or pattern inclined, you pick up patterns easily, making room for that. And when you make room for that, that makes room for healing within you, that makes room for full self-expression. So we're going from apologizing for this thing that is kind of a little different about me, to making full room for it so that you can develop it. And, acknowledging that you are inclined in this way, or you have this talent, or I don't know, patterns just always stood out to me. I don't know, typos stand out to me. That's one thing, if I'm looking at something, sometimes a typo just jumps out to me. And it's a pattern thing. I think it is more than I'm doing some sort of very, detailed reading with a magnifying glass. So some things like that are indicators. They're little flashes for you that says there's a doorway there. And that doorway can lead to you being more fully self-expressed. So I hope that you got all of the great nuggets that came from this. I love math is brain food. I love that healing is the entry point, and that we can explore. We can feel it in our bodies. We heard earlier with the artist expose that as we're making art, the movements we make in our bodies as we're making art is also performative. It's also performance art. Dana did the deep dive into just marrying the two together, how there's two roads to get there. You can get there through science and math, and you can get there through deep, kind of leaning into the emotion side, which some might consider some types of music. And so it's a lot for us to explore. This is just the beginning, but I'm so glad that everyone came and joined us. I don't want to take up the rest of the time. I'd rather hear Dana noodle. And I think that we've all been lucky to have the time to have Dana here, have Kellyann here. I mean, this is the quality. I would spend my morning like this. I would spend every morning like this. So I'm going to shut up and let.
Can you just touch upon the lessons that you're preparing for educators in the future?
Please, yeah. So every speaker that you've heard on the Dean Talks is really a part of an advisory board. And what we're doing is gathering content right now. We're gathering research around the types of lessons that we need to create in order to supplement what's currently available, specifically for like public school or schools that don't have the budget to really create their own lesson plans. And so we're working with game developers right now. We're working with musicians, illustrators, artists, to compose and create lessons that are going to exactly meet the needs of these students and talents that they're inclined to, so that it goes from this year made that we can people give it to these schools that don't have it available on a quarterly basis. So that's what we're up to. Thank you, Kellyann, for asking.
Yeah, I also wanted to address a question from Terry about how do you get therapy outside of the corrections system. I currently am on a community advisory board with Florida State University. And what we do is it's the Institute for Justice Rehabilitation Board. And what we do there is we specifically talk about how, how police and how corrections need to be aware of what is a neurodiverse situation versus criminal activity. So there are a lot of people thinking about that, Terry. And one of the things, as I stated in the chat, is to jump online, just like you're doing, and get resources so that you can begin the conversation of how do I get the type of assistance that I need outside of law enforcement. We need to be proactive in this area as opposed to reactive and get people involved. If you want to reach out to me, then we can have this conversation and I can give you some additional resources. And my email address is sking, S-King, S-K-I-N-G, at ripefruitcreative.com. That's sking at ripefruitcreative.com. So reach out to me and I can provide you some additional resources. All right, sorry about that. We want to spend a little bit of time left with Dana, and then that will conclude our session. So Dana can take us out.
Thank y'all. This is really inspiring today.
All right. Outstanding. Thank you so much, Dana Hawkins. Thank you, Kellyann. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Ebony. Thanks, all of you for attending this session of the Dean Talks. I am your host, Stephen King. Visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for your next Dean Talks. It'll be about a month from now. Stay tuned, and thank you all for joining.